got a good group here today, so we can keep letting folks into the room, but maybe for the interest of time, let's go ahead and get started. And we are recording, so we can share the recording with those that missed the front end.
Absolutely. Okay, so thank you, Breck, and thank you to our guests for being here today. You're with the WellWaveNOW group. We are missing one of our colleagues today, who I'll introduce. He may get a chance to drop in, and that is Dr. Bob Levine, who's a renowned brain researcher and an expert in eliminating pain without medication, without drugs. He is in the throes of some hands-on direct care with a client this week. So if he can get it, if it's appropriate, he'll break away and join us. If not, we'll go ahead and continue on. But meanwhile, you've got Breck Rice here, and Breck is the chairman of Brim Health, which is very focused on changing and impacting the way that community wellness is delivered throughout the United States, and especially in rural and other underserved areas. Also a adjunct professor, as well as he is a real focused on making sure understanding that people understand medication and how to use it, how to interact with that, among many of the other things he does. Me, Tim Daniels, I'm a wellness plan manager. For the sake of simplicity and for shortness, what someone does for you as a financial manager is what I do in the wellness management world. Help you set those objectives, achieve those objectives, walk with you hand in hand to get those done. And so with a varied background in my life has brought me to that stage. But our purpose here is to share advice, share knowledge with our community in order to be able them to take something away from each session that we have, that if they can do a little more research, a little more configuration, they can go ahead and take it and work it on themselves. Sure, we've all got products, service off and offerings and education to provide and that we sell, but we also see as our duty to be able to share that advice at no charge so people can take some steps on their own and make that happen. We've been, for the past, this is week 4 of the series we've been doing on Take Charge, which is the how and why to take the lead in the production and management of your own well-being on that journey and how to do that. And we've covered a number of things in there, but in the last portion last couple of weeks we've been talking about healthy routines. So Breck, you had mentioned, and I think we should sort of revisit and recap a little bit with some additional comments on some of those previous routines we talked about. So I'll put that in your hands, Breck, if you would.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to. And thanks for the introduction, Tim. I always love hearing someone else introduce what some of your accomplishments. You forget sometimes what. Oh yeah, I did do that. So appreciate that. We could spend the whole entire time talking about everything that you've been able to help with retired athletes and making sure that they continue on the path of having a healthy lifestyle and not losing a lot of their muscle mass and their strength and conditioning. So we might just have to focus one time just talking just about that on one of our weeks and everything you've done with all of our retired professional athletes. Yep. But in the country here in the United States, we've never spent more in healthcare. We're over $5 trillion a year that we spend in healthcare, and yet we all know more people that are sick and dying of something. It seems like more than ever before. So, why is that? And so I'm glad we're approaching these topics to kind of talk about how we can take responsibility for ourselves and do things that will help us have longevity and not just live longer, but be healthier doing it. And that the first thing for me is adopting a healthy diet, right? There's coaches out there that'll talk just about gut health. They focus their entire career just on talking about having healthy gut, and it starts with the nutrition that you're taking in, and it needs to be whole food based. One of my favorite books is The How Not to Die. It has some great examples in there for plant-based nutrition, but I think there's also some benefits to lean protein as well from animals, fish and other foods as well. But everything that's fresh, fruits, vegetables, nuts, berries. There's so many great things that you get, antioxidants and everything you can get from berries. Even just a sprinkle of certain seasonings in your food. You get some really tremendous results from a little bit of cinnamon. I love putting cinnamon on my breakfast cereal. One of the best antioxidants that you can add to your food.
Right.
The other thing too, I think is that we need to focus a little bit on having a good exercise routine. Tim, we probably sit too much, right, in Zoom meetings. That's why, you and I were talking about, hey, in between meetings today, we both went out and took a walk. Doesn't have to be, a high impact, a very intense aerobic activity. We just need to have activity. And the aim is around about 150 minutes per week in exercise. That breaks down to be, 20 minutes a day or 3 days of a good 50 minutes worth of exercise. So that's kind of where I start. That's my baseline: good nutrition and good activity in exercise.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's hard to do exercise. So find something you like to do, like a sport.
yeah. Yep, fantastic, Breck. And I think, those two things, diet and exercise, certainly play into a lot of things. They affect, not only your health, straight health, but the your immune system. They affect your mental sharpness. They affect your stress. So all those things are that. As we go along here, I will say to our guest, if you've got, we'll go for about another 22 minutes here, pontificating a little bit and trying to share. But if along the way, if you've got questions, go ahead and do put those in the chat. We'll try to address that, the last part of that. And certainly what Breck and I always make ourselves available to go beyond that sort of half-hour mark, stay on for another half hour if people really want to dialogue and have that. But do put your questions into the chat, and if you got it, we'll go along with that. Breck, one of the things that you and I often chat about is, and talk about, right, is those routines. Good, whether they're the diet or the health, or the couple of things we'll go into a little bit more here: mental sharpness and stress interruption. Is the how of that is always good, and the what of that is always good. But it's how do you get people to undertake? Why should they? What's the what of routines? Why should someone undertake them? And then number two, if they're going to undertake them, how can they be successful in undertaking them a little bit? Sort of on the what part of that, to me, sometimes I just kind of discard the fact, but routines really is what you are, and really your state of being. So when you're creating a routine, you are becoming something. You are creating something. So if you have a healthy routine, then I'm a healthy person. If I have a routine of going of running Brim Health, which I leave in your good hands, but then I'm chairman of a company. If I have that routine of what I do each day, so that's what routines are. They're the way of making change. They're the way of being someone and being in your well-being on that. But then secondly, now to accomplish those and achieve those, I step back a little bit, and people often talk about, you got to have a why. Why do I want to be a musician? Why do I want to? Yeah, you take your ass, your young adults in college. What are you going to college for? What are you studying? Why? And the why is critically important, but it's not enough. It's the belief that you can, coupled with that, and emotional attachment to that belief that you can and that why, that then causes one to take action. And you were chuckling about a little example, a personal example of that I gave. But to me, one event which sometimes I looked at then over the decades as being small really impacted my life tremendously. And that was as a seventh grader when I had hit puberty, and I had gotten fat, and I was no longer the second fastest kid in my elementary school. I was now in junior high. I date myself. I went in middle school. It was junior high, like it still should be. That 7 to 9 is better than that 6 to 9 in there. But we had the presidential physical fitness test that was there. Obama changed it into the youth I want to say, don't hold me to it, but it's a presidential youth fitness program, made it less competitive and less testing. But at my day, it was the test. And I'm sitting there in seventh grade, holding on to the pull-up bar for 2 minutes, and I couldn't get my chin over the bar one time. I had people who were detractors kind of, I could hear them jittering and sneering. I had my friends encouraging me. I had my I called it my gym coach, but it's actually my wrestling coach the next year and for a couple of years after that, Mr. Dillon. He's just saying, come on, Tim, come on, Tim. And I just couldn't get it done. That little stint there, after I got that after that, I said, this is never happening again. And I was at emotions in it. This is just not going to happen to me again. That led me to run home and do research. Somehow I found a Marine Corps strength training program. Talked to my dad, who was a former Army guy. He said, you can't start with my weights, Tim. You got to have something lighter. I said, all right, Dad, I'll find a way to do that. And I got an old broom handle and broke it into pieces and put it in the old oil cans and found cement to make them light. Worked on it. I started working out 6 days a week. That eventually led to me becoming a pretty good wrestler. That led to me getting a financial assistance as a collegiate athlete. So that one little event, that piece of motivation and the emotion behind that led to a world of change. And that's when I work with my clients and the wellness plan management is dig deep, find out why you're doing it, but also attach to it the feeling behind it, what it's going to produce into you, so that you will then motivate and take action on it. Then I think you can then get into the how, right?
Yeah. So for our audience here, for their benefit, that skinny little Daniels kid that couldn't do one pull up ended up being a D1 collegiate wrestler at Stanford, no less. So great way to get an education at a high level college and setting your mind to accomplishing that goal.
Thank you. Well, and I appreciate that, but just one correction at that point in time. That was a fat little Daniel skin at that time. Yeah. But so had that routine had to come and change that, replace that fat with muscle over time and the right thing. Good. But now, as part of that, one thing I think another precursor that you often talk about, I think we ought to get into before you go into various routines, and it is a routine to get into, but one thing you talk about, I want you to really emphasize after the group, is what you call your you might have refreshed the time, but it's your wellness care, your wellness checkups, that you advocate that people have and take before as an integral part of their life.
Yeah, so as we roll out more and more of these community wellness centers, the BRIM wellness centers, they'll be available to more of more rural communities through our community pharmacies, so independently owned pharmacies and community pharmacies across the country. One of our promotions is a health risk assessment that has some amazing research behind the first 5 or 6 questions. If you can respond to those questions appropriately, it literally can add a decade to your life. Unfortunately for men, about 8 years of adding longevity. For women, it's 10 years or more in longevity by being able to appropriately answer those first there's more than 5 or 6 questions, but those first 5 or 6 are literally tied to studies that show that these activities will add a decade to your life. So it's something that I'll put the link in the chat. It's totally free to you. We are HIPAA compliant, so this is not shared. It can be made available to you personally or to your primary care provider. Once all of the BRIM wellness centers are set up, then that's where you can also go to get a copy of this. And so I'll put that link into the chat. If you want to live an extra decade, respond to those questions. And if you can't respond to those questions appropriately, then by all means, you may want to reach out to us and we can get you some help. The other place that patients have been able to find help is in the WellWaveNOW Facebook group, right? So there's a Healthcare Disruptors WellWaveNOW Facebook group where patients have joined that community because they were not able to get answers that suited their needs specifically. So with either autoimmune or other things that people are dealing with and could never get a good answer through traditional means. Someone gets a blood test done, and your PCP or your primary care provider reviews that, and you're in normal ranges, and so they don't think anything about it. Well, what is normal range for Tim Daniels versus what's a normal range for Breck Rice? They can totally be different, and so we can get you some of those answers and get you connected with a great practitioners that specialize in these areas that you may be struggling with. So encourage you to if you're not already participating in the Facebook group, I'll put that link in the chat here as well too.
Right. So and I think that's important for, as you said, for the tailoring and specificity and making it customized, as you said, what's right for the age bracket. When I go to my primary care physician, she's excellent and love her. And what the blood test they take has come back, and it's for millions and millions and millions of people. We could take, like you said, send it someplace, and I do, where it can come back and they can give me by age bracket, can give me by ethnicity. Some things are different by ethnicity on that, and so it really can burrow into that to give me guidance. I think that we call ourselves, and we are healthcare disruptors, but as you pointed out, where we are, that's not to replace any conventional provider or supplant their advice. Is to complement what they do and to help them get it done and for you and with you, because they can't see you every day. And part of what we do in our work, what I do as a wellness plan manager, which you're doing with that, the pharmacies, getting them to see, and the wellness centers, there, getting them to see people more often. I can get things on a daily basis and work it into everything in the daily routine. One thing I want to go back to that I think is very important on creating those routines that I only dabbled on. I said you gotta have the why, and you gotta believe, but it's how do you believe? How do you build that belief? How do you build that faith? We each have a little bit of either inborn faith or it's given to us by seeing people. For example, the example I often use is how do I know when I sit down in the chair and have the faith that I sit down in the chair that it's going to support me in this little thing? That's because my parents put me in it, and I saw them do it. I saw other people sit down, so I started sitting in it. So you can start building faith sometimes by seeing things and by testimonies of people, and that's why you see a lot of things on weight loss, and you see the before and after, and it gets people to say, boy, maybe this will work and I can step out on it. The other thing is, faith comes by hearing, but it doesn't have to be that I have to hear this from my professional, or I have to hear it from Tim Daniels, or I have to hear it from anybody else. You can hear it from yourself, and sometimes that's the best way to start building that faith. And so I will work, I'll give a little shout out again to our colleague who's not here, Bob Levine. He will call it your future visioning, where he has them create using a future vision of what you want to be. I don't necessarily, when I work with my clients, I don't necessarily call it future visioning, but it's the same thing. It's kind of imagine where you want to be at, imagine that can happen, write down what it's going to feel like to you, and I have them put this little statement, definite major purpose of what it is, that's with the feeling in it. I have them read it to themselves 3 times a day. I also sometimes have them record it, so they can hear it your own voice. Nothing more nothing is, and so then when they're on an exercise bike or they're walking, they play that and it's repeated in their head. So to me, you put that why, you put the faith together, and you put the emotion, and that puts you into action. And then you're giving the how. I can give them the how. They can find the how and formulate that. They can find the how a lot of places, as long as it's a trusted source. But then it starts to happen on that. Okay.
And Tim, that's 0.8 on my list, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is the practicing mindfulness. You literally have 37 trillion cells in your body that are listening. They're listening to you and waiting for that feedback, what to do. And so, cultivate a mindfulness of being present in the moment and appreciating the little things that are going right.
Right.
Acknowledge those little things that are going right for you, because you literally have 37 trillion cells that are listening to where you're at in a mindset.
That's right. And if you can get them all, the thoughts that things, the cells are wired together, fire together, and they get you all working, towards your end objective. One of the things of those objectives we said we would dive into a little bit was stress interruption, and we talked. Your exercise, your healthy diet does that. But to me, that it never ceases to amaze me how many people are feeling under stress. To me, there's a degree on that. Not all stress is bad. This thing called eustress, which is actually what you use to motivate yourself to take action, which is good. But when you have distress, the bad stress, it can just lead to cardiovascular disease. It can lead to hypertension. It causes the overproduction of hormones that cause disease. It can and plays into our other area of mental sharpness. I still remember times, and encourage people to take a look at the time when I've been under intense stress in my life and didn't know how to handle it. Boy, that really affected my ability to concentrate, my ability to perform and get things done on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is you got into a really good stress relieving practice with martial arts, right? So was it Tai Chi that you really started to get into?
Well, that's where I ended up. It's called the Wudang Kung Fu system, which very appreciative. Learned underneath a guy named Peter Kim Hope Chu and his son Garrett G, which I encourage people to Google a little bit on Garrett. Very fascinating guy a little bit. But yeah, that certainly helped, and that's a way to help manage the stress and master the stress. Certainly, we can have 5 different types of Tai Chi in it. So the movement, and I think it's the general. People can use yoga, they can use Tai Chi, they can use Qigong, but it's the movement part of Tai Chi that also helps in that relaxation and relief of the stress, both physically and mentally, versus taking postures and positions. But also on that, a good portion of stress is mental, and it's how to, and there's a chronic stress. There's all kinds, as we know. There's the chronic stress that happens. There's the acute stress. But one of the biggest things is how do you interrupt that stress, like you talked about with certain type of exercise. But I also there's some mental routines. Now, just 2 little practices I'll talk about here that I like to get people to utilize. One is what I call thought displacement. When a thought arises, I can't necessarily stop a thought from arising in the mind. For example, if I remember in career 1, I was a corporate executive, if you recall that one. And that corporation, very large corporation, went through some very hard times. And sometimes it felt like every single one of us was going to lose our job. I couldn't stop that thought of, boy, I'm going to lose my job from coming into my mind. But could I replace it with, hey, that might not be such a bad, might not be such a bad thing. I can then go find something, a better environment. So that thought displacement can interrupt that stress and really put you back to a state of balance to be able to perform. Or it's also, and that's similar, that flowed over into a second technique that I like to use, which is a thought emotion realignment. So when that thought comes to mind, that first thought, hey, I'm going to lose my job, could be that's very bad, that's terrible, my life is going to fall apart. My spouse is going to have to go get a better job. How am I going to get my son through college, type of thing? Or you can actually reassign that to the thought I was going along that says that would be a great thing. That would give me a wonderful opportunity to go find a job that I like, perform in. I've got a great support structure. This is a beautiful opportunity to take my life in the direction that I want to take it. So those 2 kind of things I encourage people to look at, think about, reflect on. Thought displacement, I mean, I can't maybe stop a thought from coming to my mind, but I can replace it with a great thought. It might just be, think of very pleasant times in your life. If you're a religious, think of your God, that replaces it. Or secondly, it also think that you can attach any emotion you want to any occurrence, and that attaching a positive emotion to that will interrupt that stress and give you time to breathe and to act type of thing.
So Tim, what you prefer something with activity, like martial arts or yoga or something over just meditation?
I think there's room for both, and I actually practice both myself. And and in my stress mastery course that's coming up, they will see both exercise and two basic meditations that I provide in there. I think something with movement helps to start to reduce the stress, to get the physical impact of stress out of one. Like because if you're overproduction of the adrenaline, overproduction of cortisol, that movement can get that out faster to give you time to breathe. The meditations can put one in a state where you can handle more of it, you're more resilient to it, you can flow to it, and turning that distress into the eustress. The meditations can help with those portions.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what if a patient is not, we're both going to agree that movement, getting up, getting movement, standing up, sitting, squatting, doing some kind of movement is going to be super beneficial.
Mhm.
What if somebody is bedridden? Is there a way that you can still get, some good circulation going and have, like we've talked to Dr. Bob about having guided meditation
Right.
while having a PEMF
Right.
treatment, right?
Well, that did come to mind. I think there are a couple of ways. Yes, the PEMF that we both use, and we understand the benefits of it. And for our audience, guess that PEMF stands for Pulse Electromagnetic Field Therapy. Been around for ages. Has a trifecta of good
Tons
under
of pro
science.
athletes, pro teams use
Yes,
it. I mean,
right. They use it. Good science, backed by studies, tons of testimonials on it. So from all angles of that. That alone, in terms of the blood flow, it's been shown to help with relaxation, it's shown to help with stress, keeping the blood flowing, helping to get out the metabolic waste. So you could talk about that adrenaline, cortisol, metabolic waste. So that can help. That's still then if someone's bedbound, it's still career two, career two was in-home care for the elderly, where I operated in 3 states. So dealt with a lot of bedbound people. It depends on the degree, right? There are people who can't move at all, and you physically have to turn them. Then you've got to go to something like a PEMF to help with things. But if it's limited movement, there are still Peter Kim Ho Chu, one of the guy I mentioned as one of my most respected martial arts, the last one I studied. When he was in the nursing home, sitting in a wheelchair, he was still doing Tai Chi movements and teaching it to the other residents. So depends on how limited you are. You can still do upper body, you can still do some type of movement. So any movement is good and helps. It's a matter of degree. And then if you physically can't move at all, then you've got to go to something, something like a PEMF to help.
Yeah, excellent tool that we use in the Brim Wellness Centers as well. But we've burned through this half hour pretty quickly. We want to make sure that we open some time up for questions. If you do have any questions that we can respond to, please put them in the chat. And Tim and I will stick around for the next 20-30 minutes to field any questions you might have. But again, thank you so much for joining us today. We do this weekly at this same hour, 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Eastern, with the WellWaveNOW hour. And this is an interactive podcast, so love to have your reaction to the comments that we've talked about, and sure, feel free to open up and ask any questions. You can put those just into the chat, or you can also come off of mute at this point and ask your question verbally as well.
Right. And then also, if you save the chat, I put my email in there. And so we'd love to have, if you don't feel comfortable, have time to do it now. If you want to provide feedback, make suggestions on topics you'd like to have covered over time, please email me and send those as well.
Yeah. And you'll see in that risk assessment, there's also a link for my Calendly. You can actually schedule a 15, 30-minute or even an hour session if we need to get into depth or get you connected with the right provider to help you deal with whatever, whatever wellness situation that you are dealing with. I hate to talk about sick care. That's what, that's what Western medicine is focused on. We want to focus on well care.
Right. And then, so there's one,
not
there's one,
against Western medicine.
not at
It's
all.
saved my life a couple of times.
Likewise, and but for the most part, right? Like I said, I have a very good integrative doctor, and that's why I sought her out. And when I first went on the screen, she brought me in. She asked about exercise, diet, all the things we talked about. So I knew that was the right one. That said, most of what our people are Western conventional healthcare providers are schooled in is something's broken. How do I identify what that is? And then how can I treat it? And you certainly need that.
Yep.
We also want to focus on how can you prevent that? And some of the treatment is managing it so that there are other things to add to that to live optimally with that condition that they've helped you manage with. We got a question here, Breck, one that says, curious how and what features you might have for those who are experiencing early onset Alzheimer's symptoms. Okay. So I can chat to that a little bit. In my home care days, career 2, which I ran for 8 years, I had a specialization in Alzheimer's and dementia care. I think so for each one, you got to look at it progresses differently with each one. Again, I start with, how you talk about the wellness checks and things you do. It's got to have the conversation and work with that healthcare provider, because sometimes indeed it is Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia. There's Lewy body dementia. There's other types of dementia that come from. Sometimes it is. But I will tell you, I had people that had UTIs and you would have thought they had dementia. But when you saw that it was a UTI and that was cleared up, that was there. So I'd look at, what is the underlying, make sure have a good feel for what the underlying cause is as best as you can. I haven't stayed completely up on Alzheimer's. It used to be you only really could completely determine that it was when someone was dead and you actually look at the brain, you could get indications of it. But you want that thought indication that's what it is. But number 2, early onset, there's still things to be done. We come back to the PEMF. There was a small study done on PEMF because of the oxygenation they could provide to the brain, the circulation of that it showed. Somebody could look up PEMF and Italy test, and you will see that it showed that that provided some help to it. There are things such as there are medications that some can take and supplements that can help a little bit, the things of that nature. So that's what you look for. You look for things like PEMF, the oxygenation of the brain. There are certain there's like the Prevagen that can help with some early onset. Then it's and there are medications that are showing some impact on Alzheimer's. So then you want to optimize what you have with it. You want to try and slow the progress with it, and work it that way. But also what's very, very key, very, very key. I wish I had known this when my father had dementia. I was a young guy, 29, 30, and so hadn't learned this portion with it. And I saw so many times in that home care environment where the family didn't understand what was happening with dementia. So for the sake of that person, with dementia, get an understanding of what it is, of what happens. How do you work with them if there's a person, and I look her up on LinkedIn, Mary Underwood, who's very innovative on that. There's another one, Teepa Snow. Take a look at what they've got. If someone keeps saying, I want to go see Dad, and Dad died 40 years ago, how do you deal with that in a way that's respectful to them? They still have feelings, even when it's not early, it's getting advanced. They still have feelings. How do you do that in a way that's respectful for them? How do you deal when it goes later on? When they're trying to wander, how can you prevent wandering? There's a simple thing, like if you at certain stages of dementia later on, Alzheimer's, if you put a black covered mat out as an entrance to a door, they see that as a hole and they won't try and go across it. So there are things, how do you deal with that person respectively? How do you keep your own sanity? Those things are as necessary and as advisable as to how do you work with that early, and that's part of dealing with that early onset, because you're seeing changes in them, you're seeing some forgetfulness, you're seeing some of that. So how do you interact with them? How do you keep them feeling well and keep that humanness with them is as important. So again, two people to look at on that. Mary Underwood, and you can follow her stuff on LinkedIn. Teepa Snow is very good, and there are others with that.
Yeah, you know that small study that you mentioned on PEMF and the brain activity that can be found on PubMed, .gov. That was evidence enough for me that I would use PEMF off-label, because the FDA only approves it for the shoulders down. But I'll wrap that around my head every day. Our brains are oxygen hogs, right? They literally, our brain lives off of oxygen and glucose, and you need good vasomotion in order for that to occur.
Right. And so, Joshua, I'm going to make one comment, but do come off mute. Feel free to answer your question as I make that. The other part, like I was a son of a military guy, right? And so he always taught us me and my 4 siblings, to memorize everything. So I used to have my bank accounts, credit card numbers, multiple credit card numbers, driver's license all memorized. I went through a period where I couldn't memorize. I lost that ability, and even worse, I couldn't memorize them again. I did start using the PEMF, and it took about 6 months, and then I realized I'm sitting there in my bank, and I'm filling out a deposit, and I'm writing down the account number, and I realized I hadn't had to go to my wallet and pull out my blank check where it had the account number on. I said, wow. And the next day, I said, let me test this. Next day, I've got to get on the internet. And yes, there it was back. Credit card number, CVV number, expiration date, all memorized in there. Did I get back to where I could keep 30 numbers in my head? No, but I've got back to where I could keep 10 to 12 in there. And our audience and you will be a judge of it. I can still hold a somewhat intelligent conversation. And that came from the PEMF on that stuff.
You remember when we used to memorize phone numbers? I mean,
Yeah.
The smartphone has made us absolutely dumb now, right? Because we don't memorize numbers anymore. And you used to have to keep, your home number, your friends' numbers. You always had those numbers in your head. And now you press a button and tell Siri to call someone for you.
Right. And that reminds me, Seth, of numbers help, and back to the person who asked that question on early onset. I also say, and that's part of the reason I got into the wellness plan management, was I saw healthcare providers and others giving up on people between 78 and 90, saying they couldn't get better, they couldn't recover, they couldn't do A, B, C, and D. And I knew intuitively, and from some of the exposure to the Chinese medicine I got from my martial art instructors, that you still could start searching for ways. So I say, even with that early onset Alzheimer's, don't give up that some mental exercises, the memorization of numbers. There's a thing up there called something I like and use called Luminosity that you can find. It has various games you can play up there for free and things of that nature. Other things of that nature, find it, work with the individual, because I am of the camp that either you can get some reversal with the right technique, or you can slow with the right overall character.
Yeah.
Joshua, you had a question? You had a question, Joshua?
Joshua, you're on mute. Come off mute. I just met Joshua last hour at a networking event. He's interesting background and a coach. I'd love to hear more from Joshua.
Okay, so one of the biggest problems that I face in life that holds me back in a health respect is, from my understanding, and well, technically not from my understanding on this part though, about 8 million people die from cigarette poison each year. And so, from my analysis and putting everything together, about 20 to 25% of people who die from poisonous air. So, I live in Mississippi, and if I go outside, it's like a 20-25% chance that I'm gonna be poisoned by cigarette poison because the 20% of the state smokes. So I've learned a lot of ways to deal with that, and so I'm interested to what your perspectives and advice would be on.
So the secondhand smoke then is,
Yeah,
I look at my list of, you know, of things that we all need to be conscientious of to really change our healthy living and have a wellness lifestyle. And number 6 on my list is quitting unhealthy habits, right? You'll see that in the even in that health risk assessment. One of the very first questions is, are you a smoker or a non-smoker? So even as much evidence as we have, and the the negative outcomes from any use of tobacco, we still unfortunately do have a lot of people that choose that over over their own longevity.
yeah, but the problem is that if you're a non-smoker and you do your best to stay away from it, but you still get poisoned by it anyway because it's just rampant in the state you live in.
Mhm.
Like, how do you deal with that without living in another state?
Yeah, well, so and you're right. It's tough. There's even aside from smoke, right? There's people don't often realize that, another air pollutant. I think it's cadmium, which is a heavy metal, and that can be caused by people just a lot of brakes have on it. So you press the brakes, it gets into the air, and so there's some things you can't avoid. So I think so my thought, Joshua, when you can, one is you avoid it as much as you avoid it as much as you can. Then it's how do you make yourself as resilient and as protective of that as you can, and that gets into what do you, and I'll step back again for a second because I think you're right. I think more, I don't remember the statistics, but they've been it's been happening more recently that people who didn't have a history of smoking or other things were showing up with lung cancer, so it was more and more prevalent. And so I'm sure there's a correlation between the type of things you're talking about and that happening. So it's how do you make yourself as resilient to it as go ahead, Joshua. You want to say something else?
I just want to say that, I mean, that's one of the main things, but you have air quality detection. Well, I've
Yeah.
seen it at times in the city that I live in that it's like on the almost don't go outside is so bad in the air sometimes. So I think in some ways our air in the United States and in Mississippi and certain places in the globe, the pollution in that is getting more toxic at times. Then it goes and it's healthy again. But it'll be sometimes healthy, especially for sensitive people, and I'm more sensitive. And there's just so much with that. And then we got the water that we're drinking. I think I tested years ago the water in my city and in the city, or I had to looked up a test on it, and it had 9 out of 18 contaminants that it tested for.
Right.
And so it brings up a struggle with that. And then a lot of people, they don't realize how toxic indoor air is versus outdoor air. A lot of times their
Absolutely.
indoor air is so toxic and they don't have air purifiers and stuff to help deal with that.
Yeah,
So Joshua, all these things that
yes.
you're talking about are all, they're all free radicals, right? So these free radicals
Mhm.
that you're taking in, there are ways to expel those free radicals, and Tim's probably got some good
Well,
background
and
on
you've
that.
got it, and you've got some things with it. Then the point your point you're at. So what are you doing? So it gets on to all the other healthy habits. One, we should advocate for air quality, advocate for water quality. But in the meantime, as we work to make those changes, things happen. Is what do you do for yourself? And it's the type of things that you kind of mentioned. So Joshua, indoor for me, I'll give a plug for my wife's company to take a look at. It's a company called Puriclants, which makes one of the best air purifiers on the market because it's not only an air purifier, it's a surface purifier. So it works both the sucking air and cure it out that way, and also puts out things that were services for bacteria and viruses. So look for things like that. Number two,
Could you spell it?
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Because I wasn't sure exactly what you said. Pure class or
Puricleanse,
okay.
Puraclenz. And
Okay,
certainly,
I
if you
see.
want
Thank you.
more on it, you can also email me and I can get you a coupon on it as well, maybe. So
Yeah,
through, but
I was just gonna say it's surprising that one of the things I learned that the lower you go to the floor, the more toxic the air usually is.
the lower you go, where, Joshua?
Low down on the
Lower you go
Floor.
to the floor, the more toxic the air it usually is.
Could be. But that I'll take your word for that one. Because I haven't looked at it, I'll accept it. But so
And
on
then
that
if you have
path, and
cooler air temperature, okay, sorry,
hold
sorry,
on, Joshua, so succinctly
sorry.
to your question. So yes, you dress you dress what you can, and you're in your own indoor air with the right type of uh, air purifier type of thing. There are also companies that produce green products so you can reduce what you're exposed to there. Then it gets to the things that Breck was talking about as well. How do you make yourself more resistant to it? How do you make yourself with the right, there's supplementation to do it. There are things that can, aside, I'm not a fan of chelation. That's where you actually take the blood and it's taken out of you and it's heavy metal. But there are products that can do that do a decent job of natural products of getting out some of the heavy metals out of your body. And then is what do you do when we talk about what's the right exercise that you're doing for this? What's the right diet that you're impacting on that? And avoid, as you said, you can't avoid it all, but avoid as much as you can on that. And then it also gets back to the thing that Breck and I talked a little bit about, but I really encourage people to dive in and understand is this, and we both can help them. And that's that pulse electromagnetic field therapy, because that helps get metabolic waste out. That helps counter some of it helps build the immune system. It helps in a number of different ways to make yourself more resistant to, to the toxins that are out there and recover from them.
Yeah. Yeah, more antioxidants because those free radicals can be picked up by the antioxidants and then taken out through your natural bloodstream that way. So the Pura Cleanse, is it an
Yeah.
ionizer? What is it? Is it using?
It does have an ionizer type thing. That's sort of the proactive part that goes out and will kill the
Yeah.
viruses and bacteria on surfaces. And then the other model then that also has the sort of suction in like a HEPA to clean the air
Yeah.
as well. So you get
I was going to show
temp.
Josh this little device here. This is actually a portable one that I can wear around my neck. And during the height of COVID, I'd wear this on planes, and it basically just creates a little electrical storm right in front of my face. And don't ask me what the brand name is. I can look it up for you and get it to you. But this is a little ionizer that I could wear, and it just zaps the little particles out of the air and drops them to the floor, become dust particles, whether it's a pathogen or even in a pollen. I'm pretty allergic to a lot of things, so this takes the pollen out of the air also. So just a little electrical storm that just happens in front of my face to get some of those impurities from not going into my lungs.
All right.
Do you see it, the electrical storm, or is it invisible?
Oh no, it's totally invisible.
So where are you at, Mississippi, Joshua?
Okay.
I have
Hattiesburg.
Hattiesburg. Yeah.
One of the yeah. Go ahead.
So I have family from Charleston. My father was actually born in Charleston. Other questions
That's
or
in South
go ahead.
Dakota. I mean South Carolina, right? That's in South Carolina, right? Charleston.
No,
There
Charleston.
is
That's
a
part.
South
That's
Carolina.
like the northwest
Okay,
part of
so it's in South
Mississippi.
Carolina, and there's
Yep,
one in Mississippi
and
too.
one in
Okay.
Mississippi. He's on the Mississippi part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, the
So many
home of
cities.
what's his guy? Actor, deep voice, played 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 one in Batman for a while. Been around for a long time. Morgan Freeman,
Oh yeah.
hometown of Morgan Freeman.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from anyone?
I can ask another question if you want me to.
Go right ahead. You go ahead, Joshua, if you got another one.
Oh, it's frozen for me.
We can hear you just fine.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It kind of was breaking like it was freezing. Okay. Okay, a lot of what you said, I already do with the diet and supplements and exercise. There's specific ones and stuff. The other question I have is, when we exercise, from my experience, a lot of times it increases dopamine, but sometimes if we work out or build muscle, it's depleting us of serotonin or magnesium. So, what's like recovery things that you after you exercise to build yourself back up and heal from that?
Yeah. Well, Brian, Breck, you want to comment on that? You want me
Yeah,
to
go
comment
go
on it?
ahead. I mean, I have my own recovery, things that I use, and I think one of the um promotion that something I launched on one of my roundtables is this BioLite, and I'm trying to show it. I launched it on a interactive podcast. Now you can get it right through your pharmacy's wholesaler, but it's everything you would get in a liquid IV. But the reason why I like it after a hard workout is because I'm getting 550% more electrolytes than you would get from a
There
leading
you
sports drink. It just doesn't have all the
go.
sugar and artificial sweeteners. So
Yeah,
a lot of electrolytes.
yeah. Well, I guess well, I'm real old school on that, Joshua. So I might leave it with Breck. But so for me, it's just that I don't do anything. I've got my son and others that take a protein before, will take a protein out, and then they got the branched chain amino acids and all that thing, all those things. I just I try to keep hydrated. The Breck takes a drink. I try to stay hydrated, so I make sure I do a proper amount of hydration. I have I really work on my diet, a very well balanced diet to help recover from that. And then I also use the PEMF because it helps again. Because you take those electrolytes in, if I'm taking the protein that I have in there, one of the things PEMF does is improve circulation at the micro vessel level, the capillaries, the last mile to the cells. And when you use that, then now things circulate better. You get better oxygen in the cells. They function better. Part of that oxygen of the cells is uptake. So I'm getting more out of my nutrients, more out of my liquids, more out of that thing. And that's one of the reasons a lot of professional places like a lot of professional athletes and a lot of elite teams use that for recovery and to train
And
harder,
that's key,
longer,
that
recover
last
faster.
mile, right? That's key
Yeah,
because you talk to a cardiologist, ask them, what percentage of the circulatory system can they work with? It's less than 25%
right.
are the large vessels.
That's right.
Over
Yeah,
70, about
76%.
76% of your entire circulation is these little micro, the capillaries that cardiologists can't even help with. So
Right.
that's where the PEMF comes in and moves things to the last mile.
Right. Joshua, it looks like you raised your hand again. Go right ahead if you've got another one.
Yes. Are you saying PDMF or PMF, and what is
Uh,
it?
P as in Papa, E as in Echo, M as in Mary, F as in Frank. PEMF, pulse electromagnetic field therapy. And so, I consider myself an expert in that. I've worked in that for more than 7 years. Got into it as I was researching. I knew, like I said, I knew there was. I felt satisfied helping people cope as they aged, but I also knew there was a way to get better. And in my search for ways to get better is where I came across PEMF. So certainly you got my email and reach out on that. But also, I think it was Ronald Reagan and the CIA said, trust but verify. So I always like to give people a way to verify before they even want to engage in that topic differently. Breck has mentioned a couple times, PubMed.gov. That's a trusted source run by the National Institute of Health, where you find the gold standard of studies, double-blind, peer-reviewed type of thing. If you go up and you put in PEMF on PubMed.gov, as of 2 weeks ago, you will get over 800 responses in that. So just go in there and take a look at what it's about. Same thing, go out to Google Scholar and put in PEMF therapy. There you get things that aren't they're very good, but not, maybe there's silver standard, some of them. You'll find gold standard, maybe you'll find silver standard out there. and put in PEMF therapy, and you'll find tons. I think there's tons on there. Then I say go over to YouTube, from, and just put in PEMF therapy, put in PEMF therapy and back, anything you want to look at it. And you'll see tons of things come back on that on testimonials.
So
And
Josh,
so,
my expert that I went to for this was a gentleman by the name of Tim Daniels. So I learned everything that I know about PEMF from Tim right here. But my first exposure to it was over 6 years ago when my niece had gone through radiation and chemo treatment for a brain tumor. And luckily they had cured her cancer, right? But all of that radiation scarred her pretty badly, and her lungs were kind of scarred up, and it was hard for her to breathe without the aid of being on oxygen all the time. And there was a local doctor here in Scottsdale that he and some nuclear engineer had put together their own PEMF program, and it hadn't gone through FDA approval, but they were getting some really good feedback. And so we brought our niece out here. She was living out in Nevada at the time. We brought her out here. We got her some treatments. It worked. They were nice enough to give her a prototype that she took back home to Carson City and used. She called it her magic box. So that was my first experience to PEMF and what it can do. Now, fast forward 5 years, and I run across a device that actually has gone through the FDA approval process, which is important to me because our clinics, we have to have FDA approved products in those clinics because we're billing insurance. We need to be able to bill insurance for these services. So there's only one that has that class 2 certification. There's hundreds and hundreds of PEMF devices out there, but there's only one out of Germany, and Tim happens to be one of the national reps for that particular product.
Yeah. So, and if you look at that, it's still, when I started 7 years ago, maybe 5% of health care providers had heard about it. Now it's maybe 10. Back then it was maybe 1 or 2% of consumers. Maybe that's 5 or 6%. But that's also U.S. If you go look over Europe, which is often ahead of us in these complementary types of things, you'll find it's in some countries there it's very well known. Take a look at Hungary. Hungary uses that PEMF in ambulance services for people that have cardiovascular incidents.
It's in the babies' incubators over there because
yep.
they know it'll develop, premature
right.
babies' lungs faster. Yeah, it's amazing right. technology.
Right, and then shown in that case where there was a certain type of prematurity where only 1 or 2 out of 10 were surviving, and it got it up to 8 out of 10 surviving using that. So very, very advanced.
Appreciate all the questions, Joshua. It's great to meet you. And Josh does, like I said, he does some coaching for energy coaching, and so pretty interesting. I look back at our earlier conversation about not being anti-Western medicine because it's saved both of our lives. But the one thing I will say about our current Western medicine healthcare system is that we do a really great job at a acute care. So anything that's an infection, there's nothing better than getting on an antibiotic to get rid of an infection. If you've got a compound fracture, there's no amount of prayer, therapy, and healing rocks that are going to put that bone back in place. You literally need an orthopedic surgeon to put that back in place correctly. I'm not speaking from personal experience or anything on that. I just got a bunch of titanium in my ankle. But where we really kind of fall down, though, is on the chronic care. It's the long-term getting, patients dependent upon a medication that's actually doing more harm than good. That's where we kind of fall down in Western medicine. And so we can do a better job with that chronic care management.
Right. So yeah, I agree with you on that. And it's the chronic care, and I applaud even to an extent the chronic care. There are things that people would have died from that the care keeps them going, but that's kind of where it stops. And things that I've worked with, whether from the home care days to now, I work with people that had MS, that had Parkinson's, that had neuropathy. Certainly, the care kept them going and managed some things, but I have seen with the things we're talking about today, and some of the things that Bob talks about, right, with it was an elimination of pain without without drugs, and with the visioning and the work he does and the muscle release and things of that nature. But with the right, all of those, whether it's even the Parkinson's, take example, even not directly talking about our stuff, there's it's a Parkinson boxing program that was developed. And to see what that has done with people with Parkinson's, in addition to the medication they were taking, is phenomenal. So that's where I say the things we talk about, and things I work with in my wellness plan management. What's the right supplementation? What's the right exercise? What's the right use of PEMF? You can help. One can help, and I've seen it and done it. You can help those people in a number of cases with those very chronic things that our conventional medicine has kept them in the game. You can still help them thrive and reach a much, I call it optimal wellness, reach a much higher level of performance and physical enjoyment with the other things, attention to the other things.
Excellent. Well, sure appreciate everyone being here today. We've have gone over an hour here, so if there are any other final questions or comments, I'd love to address those before we end. Please join the Facebook group WellWaveNOW for more information and insights.